What's up guys, my name is Liam and today we're going to be taking a look at the Phylina S450. I have been getting a lot of requests about this mouse, so is this going to be the perfect gaming mouse for you? Let's check it out. Alright guys, and before we get started, I did want to let you know that metkeys.com did actually send this out to me, so Metkeys, thank you guys very much for that. However, with that being said, everything that you'll be hearing in this video today is going to be my own words and my own opinions. Starting out with the box, it does come packaged inside of this tiny box here. There's a side. On the back, you do have some specifications. Here's the dimensions of the mouse, and it looks like this is included with a 100 milliamp hour battery. That is a tinier size battery, but they do claim that you get around 40 hours of battery life. And upon opening up the box, here we got the mouse sitting at the very top. I did get it in this white colorway here, and here's what it looks like on the top and on the bottom. Then included in the bottom here, it does have this little box full with all of the additional add-ons that it comes included with. Inside, it does come with an instruction manual, and they actually do have a side that is included in English, and it even kind of goes over how to use the software in it. A set of mouse grips. You get a white USB-C cable, dongle, and the dongle adapter. And then finally, they also do include an extra set of PTFE skates. So coming over to the actual mouse itself, starting out here at the bottom, there is only one button on the bottom, and it is this power button right here in the middle. I also just noticed something that's written here down on the bottom of the mouse. On the back of the box, it actually says it comes with a 100 milliamp hour battery, but right here at the top of the mouse, it says it comes with a 300 milliamp hour battery. And I can kind of see the mouse inside here on top of the PCB, and it does look a bit larger, and I do believe that this actually is a 300 milliamp hour battery. And I have seen a lot of people commenting about how the bottom looks, how it looks like they did kind of copy something similar to the Lamzu design. And I was actually testing it out because part of the reason why Lamzu did this design right here is not just for aesthetics, but it also can store the USB dongle into the bottom of the mouse. And I was testing it out over here on the S450, and it doesn't look like you can actually fit the dongle into the bottom part of the mouse to store it. And when it comes to the skates, these are kind of your typical harder type of plastic skates that you've been finding on these mice that come in around $50. I was looking to see if you can actually fit the dot skates on here, and if you are using these 0.8 millimeter dots, it does look like they are a little bit wider than the actual skates themselves. So you'd probably have to fit these on top of the base if you were to put them on here and possibly increase your liftoff distance, but that was just something that I noticed. These skates are kind of on the thinner end. And then one last thing I wanted to point out on the bottom of the mouse, as a lot of you know, this is pretty much a clone of the G-Wolves HTS Plus, and I have a couple of the HTS Plus. I have the Classic Edition, the 4K Edition, and one thing I did notice about this mouse, we'll get into it here shortly, it does kind of impact the overall feeling and balance, but as you can see on the G-Wolves mouse here, they do put the battery down in the bottom, and it does help out a lot with the balance. And as you can clearly see, they don't have anything down here to kind of evenly distribute the weight. And coming back over to the top, the click implementation on here, they're actually using Huano micro switches. I really don't know what that means because there's been kind of a bunch of different variations out there. However, the clicks, they're pretty good. They have very minimal pre-travel here on mouse button 1 and 2. They do have a little more post-travel, and if you do make your way closer towards the front of the mouse, you can make some contact with the edge of the button and the bottom base of the shell. But aside from that, the clicks overall, they feel pretty good. The scroll also works great as well. As you can see here, it does have a pretty low profile from the top of the mouse, but it does have pretty nice defined steps. I do like this rubber that's on top of the wheel. It's pretty grippy, and it's really easy to click and to spam your middle mouse button. Over here at the top is where you have the DPI button, works fine. It's down in this little groove right here, so never seemed to get in the way. I never had any issues activating it or anything like that, and it feels nice and solid. The side buttons, they work pretty well, and I didn't have any issues with them in game. The one common theme that I've been kind of noticing around these kind of $50 styles type of mice is I do feel like the implementation of the side buttons, they are a little bit spongy. They have a little bit of pre-travel there, as you can clearly see, and the front button has a little bit of post-travel as well. It's not too bad, but the rear button, it does have quite a bit more of post-travel. You can kind of push it in the shell there and it does have a little bit more play on it. But aside from that, comparing it to more expensive mice is where you do get a little bit more premium on the side button feeling. But again, the overall implementation of these, how they work, the use of them, they seem to work fine for me in game. One thing that does really stand out to me about the quality of the shell here is it feels incredibly solid. Like, I'm talking, it's pretty much perfect. There's absolutely no creaking, no flexing, no bending. You can't activate the side buttons by pushing into it or anything. There's like literally no movement or play in the shell at all. And I'm not sure if there is some type of a coating on here. The surface of the mouse, it feels incredibly smooth. It does feel a little slippery. It's not that grippy at all, but I would say that there is possibly some type of a painted coating on here, unless it's just like a really smoothened out injection mold plastic. And it does feel plasticky, but like I said, it definitely feels to me a little bit more smoother. All right, so let's drop a click and quality sound test. And one last thing that I did forget to mention is the overall click quality from the top of the mouse all the way to the back. It does feel pretty consistent. It doesn't get too heavy towards the back of the mouse, so I'm pretty sure however you decide to grip this, where you decide to grip it from, it does work out very well. All right, so next up, when it does come to the weight and balance, the weight of this mouse is coming in at approximately 56.8 grams on my scale. And like I'd mentioned earlier, with the bottom of the mouse being hollowed out, the battery sits kind of in the middle portion of the mouse, so I do feel like a majority of the weight is towards the middle or the front of the mouse. And when you're doing the left to right balance, it does feel like it's slightly a little bit more heavy on the side button side. And then when it comes to the front and back balance, it is very clearly very front heavy. The software is very straightforward and very easy to use. I'll go ahead and I'll leave links down in the description for the software, but the settings out of the box, this came at a 8 millisecond to bounce setting time for the click latency, which I found to be pretty standard on all these types of mice. And then another thing is, on my copy, I actually did notice that mouse acceleration was enabled. So I would recommend disabling the mouse acceleration. To me, it felt pretty weird in game when I first started using it. But once I disabled that, all the other settings seemed to be fine. I just made sure it was at the 1000 Hertz polling rate. And after I set my DPI, I was good to go. And then finally, when it comes to the shape of the mouse, it is pretty much an identical clone to the G-Wolves HTS Plus. It's incredibly similar. I'm not sure if there really are any differences, but I feel like the width is about the same. I feel like the height and the curve profile is nearly almost identical. The button placement and everything is very similar. And when I have the S450 lined up next to the G-Wolves HTS Plus, you can see how similar they are. There are some real minor differences here. I do believe that the curve profile on the front of the mouse, it sits just barely a little bit wider, but the overall curve profile on the mice, they feel nearly identical. The width towards the middle of the mouse, they both feature that really high middle hump profile for the smaller mice. I do believe this is probably one of the highest middle hump profiles on a smaller style mouse that there is out there. Even the curved profile from the top middle of the mice to the sides, it looks very similar. And like I said, when you're going back and forth holding these in the hand, they really feel very identical. All right, next up, when comparing the S450 to the GPro Superlight. All around, the S450 definitely feels like a much smaller mouse compared to Logitech GPro Superlight. As you can see here on the bottom profile, not only is it more of a narrow mouse, it is a bit shorter, and it does have a little bit more aggressive curves, where the GPro Superlight kind of has a flatter feeling profile on the sides. And looking at these mice from the rear, I do believe that the S450 does sit up a little bit higher as far as the mid hump goes compared to the GPro Superlight, but they're really not that far apart from each other when it does come to the actual height. And then finally, when looking at these two mice from the sides, you can clearly see the GPro Superlight just feels like a much larger mouse. It does feel longer in the hands with this very slow taper from the top middle hump down to the rear of the mouse. when comparing the S450 to the Lamzu Atlantis Mini. As far as the actual width goes on these mice, I do believe that the Lamzu Atlantis Mini, it does feel just a little bit more narrow down at the very bottom and middle point of the mouse. And even on the front, I do feel like the Atlantis Mini does feel a little more narrow as well. And though the Atlantis Mini is a rear hump profile mouse, whereas the S450 is a mid hump profile mouse, as you can clearly see here at the top of the Atlantis Mini, it feels much wider with the curves coming out less aggressively from the middle of the mouse out to the sides. And the curves on the side of the Lamzu Atlantis Mini definitely feel a little bit more aggressive compared to the S450, but as you can see from the side profile here with that mid hump, it definitely sticks up much higher and much taller over the Atlantis Mini. And next up, when comparing the S450 to the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition. Both of these mice are not that far off from one another when it comes to the actual size. As you can see here on the sides, I do feel like the Viper Mini does curve a little bit more aggressively, but overall when you put these mice together, the total width of them, they're very close to one another. Even looking here at the front of the mice, the Razer Viper Mini might be just a little bit more narrow towards this most center point here, but again, aside from that, they're not that far from one another. The S450 does stick up a lot higher and it does have way more of an aggressive middle hump, whereas the Razer Viper Mini does feel like a bit more of a lower profile mouse. And then coming over to the side profile here, as you can clearly see, the S450, it just makes it feel like a bit of a taller, bigger profile mouse, where the Razer Viper Mini feels a little bit shorter and flatter in the hands. Alright, next up, when comparing the S450 to the VGN Dragonfly F1. The VGN Dragonfly does feel like a little bit bigger of a mouse compared to the S450. Down here on the bottom, the S450 doesn't have as aggressive curves as the VGN Dragonfly, but overall the VGN Dragonfly just feels like a little bit more of a wider mouse all around. Coming over here to the rear of the mice, you have a much higher profile mid hump here on the S450, and the VGN Dragonfly, it's a lot flatter at the top of the mouse. Then finally coming over here to the side profiles, where you can clearly see that the VGN Dragonfly, it sits a lot lower and it feels like a flatter style of a shape, but it is a bit wider and longer in the hands. Alright, next up, when comparing the S450 to the Darmoshark M3s Varun. The curve profile on the bottom of these mice is pretty similar. I do feel like the curving from front to back is just a little bit more aggressive on the S450, but overall I do kind of feel like the Varun does feel like a little bit of a wider mouse. The Varun is also a rear hump profile mouse, whereas the S450 has this much higher middle hump. The S450, the hump is a lot more aggressive and it makes it sit taller over the Varun. And aside from the S450 feeling a bit taller, I feel like all around the Varun it feels a little bit wider and a little bit longer of a mouse in the hands. Alright, and then finally, when comparing the S450 to the M800. On the bottom of these mice, the M800, it does feel like it has a bit more aggressive curves, and it does feel like it's a bit wider compared to the S450. The mid hump on the S450 is clearly more aggressive, and it makes it feel like a taller mouse in the hands. And coming over to the rear of these mice, the M800, it has a little bit more of a flatter and softer feeling curve profile at the back. It doesn't feel as aggressive or high up in your hands. I do feel like on the M800, it does feel a little bit longer and wider in the hands. Alright guys, so that wraps things up on the Phylina S450. If you feel like I've missed anything or left anything out, please let me know down in the comments below. Aside from that, if you've enjoyed this video and are interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I've left affiliate links down in the description below if you're interested in picking up any of these mice and supporting the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.